Time to call Dello Stritto. The show just flies. Kevin, we need 5 hours. Because I do want to talk to you about your new hairdo, but, you know.
Yeah, it's cool. I think they left us.
They've done it before.
Frank Dello Stritto, talk about movies.
I am Dracula.
How are you? I was wondering who you were.
White Zombie. Frank Dello Stritto has a book called Vampire Over London. Am I correct?
That's right.
And that movie, Vampire Over London, I see all over the place on the web, has 3 different titles. Mother Riley Meets the Vampire.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a 3rd title somewhere.
My Son the Vampire.
Very good. I knew you'd know that.
Yeah.
But Vampire Over London, you wrote because Bela was in London.
He was in the UK for 8 months in 1951, and that was kind of a blank page in his biography. It was as if you think the name of a famous person, Napoleon, Winston Churchill, John Kennedy, and you read all about it, and somehow everybody had overlooked the year. And I was living in Aberdeen, Scotland. I traveled around on my job a lot, and I hooked up with a co-author, Andy Brooks, and together we researched his 8 months there because very little was known about it, and we found enough to make a book out of it. So that became Vampire Over London, the same subtitle, Vampire Over London, Bela Lugosi and Britons, with the same title as one of the movie titles for the movie he made in 1951.
Now, you've read The Immortal Count, the new version?
Yes.
Amazing book. I'm knee-deep in it, and I love it. Does it differ much from the Count, the original Count book he put out, other than being so much more?
No, fundamentally, it's the same book.
Okay.
He put a lot more detail in some areas. I have to have the 2 books side by side, but I imagine which I never have, but I imagine if I did, the Immortal Count would be noticeably thicker than the Count. And but to me, the Count will always have a special place in my heart because that really broke the ice. Before that, there were not only were there not any hardcover biographies of Bela Lugosi, there were no softcover biographies. There were no biographies virtually of any horror movie star. And so Arthur Lenig, who wrote the book, The Count, and then updated it to The Immortal Count, was pretty much breaking new ground, and he was on his own. So he had to do all his own research, etc. If I decide to write a book on Bela Lugosi today, there's 100 published sources I can go to back me up, and he pretty much was on his own. So I really I feel I personally owe him a lot for The Count, and I think horror movie scholarship does.
Now, your book is kind of like a good companion piece to his because you add that extra year.
Well, I get it. His is a straight biography. We were able to because I was living over there. And we found a lot of people that had known Lugosi in 1951, worked with him, etc., but had never talked about it. And you can go out to Hollywood and still find people that worked with the old stars, but the thing is they've been telling their stories for 50 years, and they started to repeat themselves. And this was virgin territory for us. So I really get into his 8 months in Britain day to day, and we get into what it was like to be on a theater tour in post-war England, the trains, the lodgings they had to find, et cetera. So we get a lot of detail. So it's really a history of 1951, and it is surrounded by a full biography of Lugosi. There's a chapter or 2 before he gets to UK, and there's a chapter as an epilogue. But the bulk of the book is him in the UK, and plus a chapter each on his other 2 trips to the UK when he made 1935 when he made Mystery of the Marie Celeste, and 1939 when he made Dark Eyes Over London. And his 3 British films all have multiple titles, so you can find them under different titles, but he only made the 3 of them.
And we've got 3.5 minutes left, so let's go right into White Zombie.
White Zombie. Okay, it's a classic of the early 1930s. Lugosi filmed Dracula with Universal Studios in November 1930 when it became a big hit. In 1931, when it was released, they put him under contract. He only made 1 movie for the year he was under contract, and that was Murders in the Rue Morgue. And then he was released because they had him on the contract. They had Boris Karloff on the contract, and they only intended to have 1 horror star, and that was Karloff. So Lugosi was released. He was a free agent again, and the first movie of his free agentry was White Zombie, which was made in early 1932, filmed in less than 2 weeks. If you look at different accounts, it's either Lugosi's favorite film, or it's a film he didn't like to watch because he thought he settled for too much. He only got like $1,000 for it, or he was making $500 a week in 1931 when he was under contract for Universal, so he basically got his $500 a week for while filming White Zombie, and he always used to scratch his palm and say, "Where's the money?" But the movie came out. It's unique among the horror movies of the time in that its atmosphere and its pacing. I imagine some modern viewers might find the pacing kind of slow. There is no denying there's some weak acting performances, and whether you like the movie or not depends on how much of those you can swallow. The romantic lead, John Herron, is one of the worst performances I've ever seen in a feature film, and the guy who plays Dr. Brunner, Joseph Cawthon, is just not right for the role of Dr. Van Helsing type, the all-knowing missionary who helps the romantic lead be reunited by defeating the zombie master. Something to watch in this movie. Bela Lugosi's character is never named. He's always called Murder Legendre in the listings. If you look him up on the Internet Movie Database or Wikipedia, whatever, they always give his character name. His character is never named in the movie, and it's not listed in the credits. He's referred to as that man or him, or are you going to see that man again? And why they insist on tagging him with a name he never had, I don't know. I think it's much more mysterious to have him known simply as the Zombie Master. This was the first zombie movie, and zombies, in the last, starting with Night of the Living Dead, and recently, last 10 years, I can't name all the zombie movies that are made, but zombies were always the poor boy among the Hollywood monsters.
Yep.
There was no major studio ever touched a zombie movie, with the exception of RKO made I Walked with a Zombie, which, if people haven't seen it, the title sounds a bit absurd, but it is a classic. It is known as Jane Eyre in the Tropics. But other than that, zombies, when they did make an appearance, were on Poverty Row, and this movie was one of them. This was a very low-budget movie, and if you watch the movie at all, you'll see a lot of style on sometimes, but you'll see them cutting corners.
And Frank, that's our show for tonight.
Okay, well,
but
I'll talk to you next week about Bela Lugosi meets the Brooklyn Gorilla, right?
Sounds good. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. And that's our show for tonight, people. White Zombie, Frank Dello Stritto, Danny Sheridan, and Nat Simpkins. Good show, Kevin, huh?
Yeah.